Welcome everyone for episode 4 of this podcast series. This is such a crucial, important episode where Mrs S really starts to talk about staff, well-being and wellness, investment in staff and their development, and really goes to tell us a little bit about some of how she infuses that into leadership, into the organisational culture, but how things like the academy has come about and why it's so important that it's not just about the kids, who of course are so important, but it's also about the staff and how important and crucial the staff are to the Morehouse culture. I hope that you enjoy the episode, everyone.
I think I've really been struck by lots of the conversations we've been having have brought in thinking about who we recruit, how we treat our staff, how we value our staff, how we make them feel, but also how relational the approach is and how that's not just about the kids, but each other. And you've spoken about values around respect. And I think there's a lot of organisations, as we know, out there that do lots of training about interventions and support and lots of meetings about talking about the kids, but often there isn't a huge emphasis, and staff's well-being is sometimes in the background or sidelined or an afterthought. And from my understanding at Morehouse, you've kind of really tried to put lots of things in place. Doesn't mean there might not be more to do, but lots of things in place to support staff to really think about their own well-being, their own anchoring, their own grounding. So yeah, I just think it'd be really wonderful to firstly hear, why is that important? Why bother? Why invest in it? And then what have been some of the things that you've done to try and support staff's well-being?
Yeah. I think I would probably start with saying that the staff is the engine of the organisation. And if we don't get that right, either the train doesn't run or it doesn't run well. And I think that the work that we do is so central to both staff well-being and the well-being of children, that we need to keep an eye on lots of elements of what's happening with and for staff, for example. I think that the fundamental is the best terms and conditions that we can have for staff. And in that, we need to stop and look at shift patterns, time off for staff to recharge batteries, and paying attention to the everyday staff experiences that we have as human beings. Ill health in families, staff ill health, just all of the human challenges that we face outside work. And so we need to, as an organisation, recognise the impact on staff. So, for example, if a staff member has lost a family member, then we would automatically order flowers. We would ask if it was appropriate to go to the funeral, both to represent the organisation, but to indicate to the staff member that they are valued and that we're sharing in their experience. And so I think that it's not easy balancing the rights and needs of staff versus the need for staff to be very professional, because we have to get it right. And I think that in a previous podcast, I spoke about an example where we forgot the humanity element in the disciplinary process. But I think that it has to be a constant conversation between the standard of professional practice and experience that children and families have, and the human element of if we don't get it right. And then imposed on top of that is we are employers. And so we have external challenges, both in terms of staff requiring to be registered in their appropriate discipline, standards of behaviour and practice that will have implications on our disciplinary procedures. And then on top of that, the legality of being an employer, and trying to make sure that we can balance all that together. It's quite a challenge. And I think that probably for me, the thing that I struggle most with is the failure for society to recognise the importance of the work that our staff do. I think that we can expect staff to have a very high standard of skill and knowledge, but do we invest enough in them? And hence the reason that we decided to create the Training Academy. And that was to ensure that staff got access to the range of training that allowed them to develop the skills that they need. And again, it goes back to beyond care and education. It has to be an organisation-wide recognition that if we're asking staff to do a certain role, then we have a responsibility to support that staff member to achieve the skill level and expertise and experience that we get the best from them. And so we do things, as I say, like if a staff member has a sad experience, a bereavement, we would try to support them in that. Staff birthdays, we give staff a birthday card from the board. Christmas time, we give the staff a small Christmas present. And if there are events that are happy events, we celebrate again with flowers. The other thing that we started to do over the last couple of years that has a win-win outcome, we started taking staff to things like the Great British Care Awards and nominating staff. In the past, we've nominated one of our housekeepers who won nationally as Housekeeper of the Year. We have a manager who recently has been nominated in the Scottish part of the Great British Care Awards as Manager of the Year. And we're going down to Birmingham in a few weeks' time. And for me, that's twofold. It's publicly acknowledging how proud we are in staff, no matter what part of the organisation that they play their part in. So it's about celebrating that and proudly telling the world that we have the best, which I'm sure every organisation believes. But it also gives an opportunity for us to celebrate with staff. And, things that I didn't think about before we started doing this, taking staff away for a couple of days down to Birmingham, staff getting their hair done at the hairdressers, all of these small human things that say to staff, as an organisation, we value you. And they see the senior managers in a different light, and we can have humour and celebrate. And I just think it cements the relationships in the organisation. So those are the everyday considerations that we have. But I think what's important is that we strive to make sure that we can give staff terms and conditions that allow them the freedom without the worry of a decent salary and knowing that if something goes wrong in their life, that we as employers are standing alongside them. And so it's little bits of being part of a community. It's little bits of opportunities to communicate we care. And alongside caring, we're very proud and celebrate any opportunity which allows us
You're
to
big celebrators, aren't you? Which I love. But I think you've captured so much there around. Firstly, I loved when you spoke about the staff being the engine. I just think that's such a beautiful way of viewing and positioning, but also something you said, which I think so often isn't kind of held in mind, is the emotional heavy lifting of this work and the emotional toll and what it's like to keep your heart open. And you know, there's that quote that you've heard me say by Rachel Remen, the expectation that we can kind of be marinated or immersed in trauma and suffering and loss, and walk through it every day, walk through water every day and not in some way get wet or impacted. So I think, as you said, to really acknowledge it and the toll, but then to put things in place from terms and conditions and policies to all of those smaller bits. And I guess thinking about staff like you think about the kids, from the first impression kind of entry to exit, and from induction to recruitment to all of those bits that is part of the community. So I think that's huge. And am I right? And obviously there's the training academy, which is an incredible investment. Am I right in saying that you also have various different aspects like supervision and reflective practice or thinking spaces for staff as well?
Yes, staff at all levels are engaged in supervision, which is two-sided. It's about opportunity for checking in personally that the staff is okay, and professionally ensuring that the staff understand and are continuing to meet the criteria of their role. So at the one-to-one level, that happens for all staff. Alongside that, we have our psychological services team, who work alongside staff and provide opportunities on an individual basis for reflective practice, but also as part of teams to do reflective practice. So our psychological services team will work alongside a key worker, for example, if a young person has a particular need, and the psychological services team and the key worker, and if it's appropriate, other members of the team, they will work together on a care plan, a support package, and share their expertise and share their knowledge and experience on a 24-hour day-to-day basis. So we have individual focus practice sessions about the individual child and their needs, but we also have the professional development elements where either managers and or the psychological services will stand alongside the team to help them understand what their challenges may be for the young people or the group, and come up with strategies, or even just to stand alongside a staff member and team and say, this is hard, but it's okay. If we stick together, we'll get through this, but this is hard. And so it's about building in all of these elements. And then on top of that, we have an open invitation for staff. If they identify a specific area of interest that they have, then they can request an opportunity to go to an external training session. And what we do encourage is staff that may have a particular interest, that they develop that interest. I'm thinking about child protection, trauma, self-harm, suicidal ideation, questionnaires and practice. So we can have team members that say, I'm interested in this area, can I develop it? And then they become the resource of excellence or information that is shared among the team. So it's multifaceted and it comes in at all different levels.
And I think what you've just said is so powerful there, that there's a menu of options and there's not a one size fits all, but there's so many different it's not just we'll talk about it for 2 minutes. It is infused, it's embodied, it's actioned. There's an investment and commitment that to work well, you need to be working well. And, that well-being leads to well-doing. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, and something that I sort of, just to share a personal really experience when I came over, was, not only just the thoughtfulness to the detail and the generosity of spirit and the welcomeness, but there was a lot of laughter and there was a lot of fun and there was a lot of joy. And I think that's such it's hard to describe when people are reading, a brochure or a document, but I think that speaks volumes also to sort of how humanizing that experience is.
It's hard to maintain at times when things get difficult, but we need to make sure that we're supporting each other and we're identifying if we're kind of going off track a little. And it does happen. Services can go into a difficult phase, and it's about recognising if a staff's tired or if a staff is struggling with a particular child or a particular matter. But it goes back to recognising that we're human beings and that we don't necessarily understand what our next door neighbour or colleague is thinking or has gone through. So it's about ensuring that staff feel safe enough to be able to have conversations, and that there isn't an expectation that we're perfect, that we do make mistakes. But it's about creating an environment where it's safe to make mistakes and it's safe to acknowledge mistakes, as long as we're learning and growing from that.
And that's beautifully put, because it aligns with our previous conversation about also the environment and the organisational culture that is trying to increase safety for the kids, for parents, for carers, and for our staff, and decrease threat and danger. And that whole sense of, if the environment could talk, all of those values being felt and embodied. And as you said, it's not, it's tricky, it's thorny, there'll be knots and bumps in the way and ruptures, but that being the sort of well-intended hope and care within that. So I think that's such a beautiful, powerful thing for people to sort of hold and to know as well, And, just to play devil's advocate, and not necessarily just about staff well-being, but we know we're in a world at the moment where there's a lot, people wanting more for less, people are overstretched and under-resourced. As a manager, I know that there's often bits where values are contaminated, or there's disciplinary practices, or there's unethical practice, or we have to fill in a million different paperworks or measures that can sometimes make it hard to stay with heart and nurturing and care and relationships. And I'm not expecting an all-singing answer, because of course it's different, but I wonder if you had some words of wisdom for how at Moore House you try to hold both accountability and high levels of practice with the love and the nurturing and the care, and if you could speak to that a little bit.
I think the reality is the challenge. It's the expectation of others on us in terms of referring agency. I think there is inevitably an expectation that when a young person joins us, that we can cure them and that we can make a difference. And I think that the reality can sometimes be different. And I think that there's no real menu of or recipe of what works. So much practice, so much engagement, so much paperwork. I think things are easing with technology, which is leaving me behind. But everybody else that's younger manages it. But I think that
I still have a paper diary, so I'm not sure about that. But yes,
I think that the challenge of the balance between what we need to do and what staff would want to do in terms of the way that we do our work, because our work is all about relationships. Our opportunity to make a difference happens in the engagement, the one-to-one engagement of our staff with a young person. It's about capturing opportunities and recording opportunities. It's about measuring outcomes and evaluation, some of it to evidence our credibility, some of it to satisfy the referring agencies. Some of it is inevitable in terms of our professional accountability. But I would not suggest we have the answer. I think it's a constant challenge for organisations. But I think that if you have thorough, well thought out systems, particularly in assessment and evaluation, I think that we sometimes forget the value of multidisciplinary meetings where we can share ideas and practice. I think there's a great value in that. But to say that you can say what the percentage of paperwork versus practice is will differ according to the needs of the young person, where they're at in their journey, and the environment that we're bringing the child into. So it's not a science, and it's something we constantly need to be aware of. And I think that one of the most important kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves is, are meetings timed well? Are they valuable? Are we using our time in the best way possible? But we always need to be guided by the needs of the child. So the needs of the child has to come first. We then have to create systems and tools that makes it easier for staff to do the second part, which is recording, evaluation, and evidencing our practice. And then thirdly, having a credible recording approach that satisfies external agencies. But it's a daily challenge, and we just need to keep on top of it. And we're tempted to want to do the relational work. We're tempted to, because we enjoy the work that we do with children, and inevitably we see that as the most important. It's certainly the most satisfying. So trying to get the balance. The other challenge that we face is the confidence of staff to use systems. We have to recognise that some staff are comfortable with technology. Some staff may not have achieved an educational standard where they are confident in their writing and reporting. And so it's about how do we support staff? How do we get them to develop their confidence in admin, recording systems, reporting, presenting at children's hearings? It's an interesting journey. It's multifaceted, and I don't know if there is a recipe that gets it exactly right.
No, I imagine there's not. But also I think it's a really important thing to acknowledge the tricky and the thorny bits, and that sometimes one volume might be dialed up more than another, but also that, as we know, when often you bring people who are more relationally led, sometimes the paperwork side can feel oppressive or too much or tricky, or you're dealing with external partners and there's, all different bits. And I think that's that sense, isn't it? But as you said, it's not necessarily what you have to do, but how you support people to do that, or how it still get links to the why, and so that it feels, or that there's an acknowledgement of how sometimes it can be tricky. So yeah, really appreciate that. I just wondered, just slightly away from the balance, but just because it might be really lovely for some people to hear, you mentioned a bit about the multidisciplinary aspect at Morehouse. And I think there might be some people listening who are like, oh, we're all social workers, or we're all youth workers, or, we're a team of clinical psychologists. Just wondered if you could talk a bit about what different disciplines do you have, and also what do you see as the richness or the benefits of having those different perspectives and different roles?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is that the people and their life experience that they bring to the internal organisation is of such richness and value. And I think we need to capitalise on that and make sure that every staff member feels and is encouraged to contribute something of who they are and what their life experience has been. And I think that enriches the lives of children. Beyond that, there has to be a recognition that we have externally a range of expertise and disciplines that inevitably have to engage with children: psychologists, psychiatrists, CAMS teams, education, a whole range of disciplines. And so for us at Morehouse, we have our care team, and it's important they're as skilled as they can be. We have our education team, and again, for me, the teachers need to be qualified, subject qualified, to ensure that our young people can achieve the same educational opportunities and qualifications as they could if they were in mainstream school. We have our psychological service team, which is a team of assistant psychologists who are engaged in our assessments of the starting point for children. They also bring expertise in specific areas of concern for children. They can support us and the team in understanding trauma. They help the team understand educational challenges and levels of attainment. And that's within the internal organisation. And we have externally, which I think is really important, we have a number of consultants that help us make sure that we are current in our understanding and our expertise. We have Patrick Tomlinson, who is one of our consultants. Patrick's in America, and we have regular communication with Patrick, and he keeps us on the ball in terms of, are we offering therapeutic experiences for children? So he both stimulates us and challenges us, and that's refreshing and that's so valuable. We have a forensic and educational psychologist externally who comes in and helps our team develop their expertise in assessment and offers his authority and signs off some of our assessment measurements. We have people like Dr. Karen Treisman, who very kindly we were able to encourage to help us on our professional journey. And I think it's just about being open to a range of disciplines and expertise, and recognising that that's a stimulating way to make sure that we are keeping fresh and up to date with practice. I've probably forgotten other people that are part of. We inevitably have relationships with educational psychologists from the local authorities. We have relationships with the CAMS teams from the areas that some of our children come from. So it's about respect of skill and expertise within a multidisciplinary team, and just accepting and valuing what they can bring that we don't already have, to help us make sure that the children get the service that they need to meet their needs, and help heal and help them grow in a way that we couldn't do if we were working in isolation.
And I think, I put you on the spot asking that question, but I think there's something really beautiful when you were talking about growth and innovation and professional development and staff feeling a bit buzzy or a bit fizzy or having different opportunities. That's another example, isn't there, of, being curious, kind of growing, developing, moving with the times, keeping up to date with different bits that are coming, and sort of also being able to ask, like, it'd be nice to have a different perspective. So I think that's just another really beautiful, important kind of foundational bit. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. One last question, just circling us back to staff wellbeing. From my experience in lots of different organisations and local authorities, of course there's exceptions, that often there might be stuff for the kids or stuff for the foster carers or stuff for the staff, but senior leadership often don't necessarily have access to some of those trainings or some of those supervision or reflective space. So I just wondered, because I have a flavour and sense, if you could just speak to, as a senior leadership team, how staff wellbeing or wellness looks for yourselves.
We have a recording system, a thorough recording system that we visit on a regular basis, that measures how often supervision takes place. We have the opportunity for feedback from managers to senior managers about the performance and development of individuals and the team. I think because we're not a huge organisation, although, we've grown, although we're spread out in terms of geography, we have opportunities for us to come together. So I think we're really appropriately able to inform each other about well-being of staff. So, for example, when it's appropriate, I could know that a staff member has a personal issue if they've given permission to share that. And I think being seen by staff and having relationships, being involved in induction, having meetings that celebrate, bringing the houses together for Christmas decorations and Halloween decorations, I think staff need to see the senior management team. They have to develop an appropriate level of understanding and relationship with senior managers. And I think that it isn't the saying, walk the walk rather than talk the talk. So we need to be sure that we never become such an organisation that we're distant from the housekeepers in the houses. And that can be a challenge. That is time consuming, but it pays bonuses. And where appropriate, sharing information, having knowledge about a challenge that a staff member may have, just sending a little card and saying, I hear that things are hard for you, or celebrating when staff achieve the Rich NC and having a graduation ceremony for staff. Because by doing that, we're saying to staff, your progress is as important as the prize givings and children's progress. So it's about making sure that we take time, making sure that we are seen at all levels, making sure that staff recognise by their engagement with us what our values are. Not something on paper, not something on the web page, not something in induction, but that who we are is alive, and that's who they experience. That's what they experience when they engage with us.
Yeah, I love that. And I just, to echo that, I was so struck when I came to deliver the training that yourself and Stephen and almost all of the senior leadership, were in for the whole 2 days, present there in the space, learning with everyone, engaging, and I think, as you said, being seen, being present. I know that you do Christmas things dressed up as Mrs. Claus and, reading stories and being there in induction. And I think that sense of, it's, I often hear from teachers at schools when I say, what makes a difference with your head teacher? And they often say, when we walk in and they're, doing the washing up in the kitchen and saying hello, or the fact that their door's open, or the fact that they remember my name or ask me how things were. It's those, every interaction is an intervention, and that real being present. And of course, we can't do that all the time. As you said, we're overstretched and under-resourced and busy, but it kind of speaks volumes, and it really feeds into that sense to staff, I imagine, of you're seen, you're important, we are in this community. So I'm pleased I asked you that question, albeit I put you on the spot. So I so appreciate that. Is there anything I didn't ask you about staff wellbeing that you wanted to share or bring into the space before we draw this segment to a close?
I think just recognise the importance. It's important that we recognise the need for staff to be supported and for us to be responsive to the needs of staff alongside the needs of children. I think, as you pointed to, I think it's important that we can have fun, and that staff see us all being able to have fun together and make a fool of the managing director and dress her up as Mrs. Claus, which allows them to see that even I can be bullied by senior managers. And
Rocking it out.
So it's about, we are a team, and we need to invest in being a team. It doesn't just come about easy. It's something we have to continually work at, but it's so rewarding. I mean, being able to share what we do with a colleague when the going gets tough, it's what we do, and it's so rewarding.
It's huge. And I love that for us to sort of end on, of it's that whole sense, isn't it? There's the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's that, a stick can be easily snapped, but sticks in a bundle. And I think you've captured so beautifully that we need to acknowledge the emotional heavy lifting and how thorny the work can be, and really invest in humans and staff wellbeing in those different ways, whilst holding standards. And sometimes we have to make tricky decisions, but trying to sort of keep true to our values. So I hope if anyone's listening, that gives a sense and flavour of the kind of ethos around staff wellbeing, and that you feel I matter and I'm important and I'm seen. So thank you so much for sharing some of that with us, and thank you to people listening for everything you are and everything you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.